Israel's made their proposal. Hamas says it wants a ceasefire.
Despite ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, one should not forget that the goal of the latter side in the discussions remains the destruction of Israel, as outlined in its 1988 charter.
This deal is an opportunity to prove whether they really mean it.
Then there's Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, whose wealth subsidizes Hamas's military operations. He has said, "The perpetual subject of Iran is the elimination of Israel from the region." It remains so.
Now it's time to raise your voices and demand Hamas come to the table, agrees to this deal, and ends this war that they began.
Despite the recent emergence of ceasefires as a means to end wars, active military conflicts on this scale typically haven't ended with ceasefires. More often, ceasefires occur when the opposition has been effectively defeated, as the Allies did to Germany and Japan in World War II.
Japs conspired with Nazi Germany to wage a war of conquest. Europe, the power of the Nazis was crushed, and now soon afterward, Japan quits in the Pacific. The second half of the most frightful of all wars ends in America's greatest victory.
The debate over the terms of the current Israeli-Hamas ceasefire proposals turn mainly on whether a stop to the fighting would be permanent or temporary, following a hostage and prisoner exchange between Hamas and Israel.
It's time for this war to end, for the day after to begin.
He literally said all the IDF are going to be out of Gaza. All Palestinians can go back to their homes. I guess kumbaya, everything's back to the way it was. The day after has to be without Hamas, yet acknowledges Hamas will still be there and says, well, don't worry, they're not capable of doing what they did after October 7th. And in exchange for that, you only get a few of your hostages out.
The departure of Israeli forces from Gaza surely would be interpreted as a victory for Hamas, and in particular its military leader there, Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar, the primary architect of the October 7 invasion, who presumably resides inside the tunnel system in Gaza, is finally beginning to emerge as the central figure in this conflict, more important to its resolution than Messrs. Netanyahu and Biden. And today, there is a danger in losing sight of the much broader political purposes of Sinwar's October 7 invasion.
Where you have people in the aftermath of babies being executed in ovens, people being raped, and elderly people being beheaded, this really lowest of the low barbarity, and yet these students think that the thing to do is to go out there and to do Hamas. Now that, to me, that was bad enough, but then to think you can commandeer the university, the property.
Hamas's long-term strategy was to force the Israeli Defense Forces inside Gaza indefinitely, as it pursued Israel's long-standing policy of freeing hostages. Sinwar calculated, correctly, that images of Israel's inevitable assault on Hamas and the people in neighborhoods of Gaza to free the hostages would in time turn Israel into an international pariah.
Mr. President, are we closer to a ceasefire?
The effort was, of course, amplified by the Palestinian Hamas protest groups across the United States and Europe, and by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
It has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th.
Progressives in the Democratic Party went further.
You are an enabler, President Biden.
Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian member of Congress, accused President Biden of supporting the wrong side.
He shields the murderous war criminal Netanyahu in the Israeli government.
Meanwhile, other members of the squad pushed back against the introduction of a bipartisan bill that would sanction the International Criminal Court for going after Netanyahu.
We still need to keep the pressure on. It is unconscionable what is happening.
Rarely discussed, because it is so incredible, is the assumption that any successor Israeli government would allow the Sinwar-led Hamas to emerge intact and with whatever weaponry it has left. The more plausible reality is that if Hamas and its leadership is to avoid execution or assassination, it will have to plot its next steps somewhere other than the Gaza Strip.
Today, Ireland, Norway, and Spain are announcing that we recognize the state of Palestine.
An additional reality, which no ceasefire proposal can dispel, is that the destruction of Israel will continue as an active planning goal of Iran, which has dismissed Mr. Biden's calls for peace.
A country that is considered the largest provider of military equipment and weapons to the Israeli entity to commit crimes against the Palestinian people is unable to present a sincere plan for a ceasefire in Gaza.
The debate over the Israeli-Hamas war has fallen deeply into a moral imbalance. The conflict's grinding status quo, with Palestinians and the Israeli hostages continuing to die, has little hope of changing. Not unless the public statements of foreign leaders, analysts, the media, and not least Joe Biden and his many translators begin to impose an equal amount of political and moral pressure on the man who put this horror in motion. Hamas military commander-in-chief Yahya Sinwar. Blame him first.